Yes.
Yes, we are.
To all the people.
Welcome in, guys.
Cool. And we are live everywhere now.
Fantastic. So that means we can tell more people to go out and buy this book.
Yeah.
Minor Feelings by Cathy Park Hong.
We are 3 chapters in, and it is really good. It's really good so far.
Are they chapters? So much as just...
Well, yeah, 3 short stories. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're longer than I would expect a chapter to be.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think before we start, this is also a good time to talk about our upcoming event. Shamika, Micah, do you guys want to say a little bit about that?
The first part?
Yes. So June 19th, 2021 is our first Juneteenth celebration that SUFE is going to be participating in. It will be here in Kansas City at the 18th and Vine Heritage Festival, which starts at 12 o'clock p.m. and goes all the way to 9. However, on that same day, we are also hosting our Juneteenth, our first annual Juneteenth comedy night at the Legends Comedy Club in Raytown, Missouri. You can go and get your pre-ordered tickets on our Facebook page at the event, or you can pay at the door when you get there. But just remember to come June 19th at 8 o'clock to the Legends Comedy Club in Raytown, Missouri for a nice comedy night. We're super excited. I'm super excited for it and nervous, but
We should
excited.
probably do it in the comments for all the people.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, drop some links.
Yeah, I'll get a link to the page. And Shamika, you want to talk about the proceeds for that night? Where they're
So
going?
the proceeds for the night is coming all the way back to us. We are a nonprofit organization that gets all of our donations from the community. This will go into helping us to continue to provide educational outlets and opportunities to the public by just giving us more resources and helping us to expand and engage you guys more. But we also have some other opportunities for educational, information to come out and for us to provide that, and this will just help us along the way. So all this comes back to us as an organization. It helps us to grow, it helps us to sustain, and then we can do more projects in the future. And we actually have a lot more projects coming up where we're going to be in Columbia, Missouri for Pride, and we're going to be actually participating in their festival, and we will have a booth there. And also, we have some events coming up surrounding our alma mater's homecoming, where we can do community education in Fayette, Missouri. So this is just going to help us to expand. There's just so many other opportunities coming up that we would love to kind of give you guys more insight on as time passes and we have more information ourselves. But a lot of great things are happening, and we're excited to be here doing this work, the work of the Lord. Literally everything I've called this week that I do is the work of the Lord.
Yeah, and we're very excited. This is going to be our first in-person event. We're finally getting back to face-to-face now that COVID restrictions are lifting, and we're very excited to really start engaging our community on a personal level, not just
It's a great time to start a nonprofit organization where we need to get out and talk to people. It's fantastic.
Yeah. Cool. So let's go ahead and jump into the second short story. Sorry, I keep calling them chapters. This one's entitled Stand Up.
As in for equity.
As soon as I read that, I was like, oh, okay. And I kind of thought it was going to be more about an equitable situation, not actual stand-up comedy.
Which is funny because most of the people who hear about our name that I talk about it to think of it as standing up and stand-up comedy. Like that is, I've had I've had to correct people so many times.
Well, that comes from them knowing that you do stand up.
Yes.
Yeah, that's
So do they think we all a bunch of comedians?
They're like, oh yeah, stand up for equity. That's funny. I get it. Like, no, that wasn't the. Never mind.
But we do have a comedy night coming up on June 19th.
That's true.
Yeah, we do.
So just
Finally,
lean into it.
it's gonna work. We're gonna leave.
Well, I just want real quick. As a comic, do you ever watch Richard Pryor? Do you have any thoughts on Richard Pryor?
Yeah, I've watched Richard Pryor.
I
know the exact one. So when she was talking about like the monkey screwing him in the head, like, and all these different like pieces, like I can remember it, and all these different parts of him, like explaining how he caught himself on fire, freebasing cocaine, all these.
Oh my God, yeah.
Like Richard Pryor is some stuff, like
It really is.
the man had the ability to tell about his life and could make anything palatable,
So, yeah, he just didn't care. I think I always talk to my friend about how comedy is like the last true art form that you can have that is like doesn't care about how people perceive it, which is like you see Dave Chappelle get in trouble for all the things that he says for these comedy night specials, and he just goes, nah, you knew what you was signing up for when you got me. And then he just shakes it off and moves on. And then no one ever calls him out ever again. It's just like that last true form of art that you can't really touch or water down.
Mm-hmm. And she kind of touched on that compared to, she's a poet, a professional poet. So comparing how she felt about poetry versus watching the stand-up, and the differences. As like a poet, she feels like she can separate her identity. She should separate her identity is kind of how she was brought up to believe. But watching Richard Pryor, he's fully embodying his identity. And that's something I think that she really craved as a poet, because, she's an Asian woman, and she was taught through education to not be an Asian woman in her poetry. I thought that was really interesting. And how she kind of stopped reading her poems at these reading events, and started doing stand-up because she felt like she wanted to experiment with that and kind of leave poetry behind for a time. Which, I don't know, Micah, maybe you can, as a comedian, speak more to how comedians actually embody their personalities and their bodies and their work.
Well, yeah, I've heard of basically it's kind of like cocaine is said to be a more extreme version of yourself. A lot of comedians have that same mentality when they're going up. It's an amplified version of themselves. Usually, sometimes they're pulling on a persona, like Larry the Cable Guy type things, but overall, when you see a comedian, they are being themselves, as long as they're actually talking about things that they have a basic grasp on. You find a lot of comedians who like try to be something that they really shouldn't, like try to be too political or try to be too crass, things of that nature, and it comes up very inauthentic.
Yeah, I'm actually glad you said that, because I was just that word was just running through my mind, like authenticity. And I think that's really what she was saying, that she craves, is being authentic and having that authentic experience. But because she is an Asian woman, she felt like through her art she wasn't allowed to be authentic. She would be buried. No one would read her poems. People would forget about her. So that wasn't something that she was allowed to do. Which then comes to the concept, which is actually the title of the book, of Minor Feelings, which is this feeling that as a minority, you have these range of emotions that are true and authentic to who you are and your experience in an inequitable world. But you're kind of gaslit by the predominantly white culture to not be able to experience those feelings or have those feelings because they're not appropriate, and you're being difficult. which
And really, that only the white feelings were the ones that mattered.
Yeah. And she talks about how minor feelings occur when American optimism is enforced upon you, which contradicts your own reality of what you're living through as a minority, which creates like a cognitive dissonance in your experience in America, which I've never heard it like framed like that, and I really like that term minor feelings as a good like summary of what that is like to grow up in a minority in America.
When I hear that she said this optimism or this, I mean, it's kind of like white American culture is looked at like it's normal, like that's the norm of what it means to be American, and anything that's living outside of that is like it's just not right. And so I was even it makes me think about the idea of a nuclear family. That people always say, this nuclear family, there's a husband and there's a wife and there's children. And people in other cultures fight so hard to have that look. And our circumstances does not allow us to have a nuclear family in the same way that white people do. And when we can't have that, we're seen as outside the norm or something's not right. But taking into no account the cultural, relevancy of how family is structured outside of the white community. So those are the things that it makes me think of when we say like, what is, we talk about, and you do embody those feelings because we live in an American culture where whiteness is God. And so it's almost like if I can't live up to God's standards, then I'm falling short. Those are
Yeah,
my
and
thoughts.
I think it's also like the word that even in the first story that kept popping up was gaslighting. It's almost like what she's really trying to get at is that to be a minority in America is to be gaslit your entire life by white culture.
But white culture doesn't know it's doing that.
It's true.
White culture believes that what it's doing is normal.
That is an excellent point, and that's something that I was actually just flipping through to see if I could find some of these quotes. So I think it's interesting to note some of the differences between sort of the institutions of poetry and academia versus then she starts getting into Richard Pryor and the whole comedy sphere. I think it's a really great thing to point out that a lot of the times when white people set up the parameters for how society or whatever construct should behave, they're not a lot of the times they're not trying to see it from other people's perspectives, and sometimes they're just failing. I think in terms of poetry and academia, no one's trying to think of it from anyone else's perspective. She uses a lot of great quotes from very famous poets, specifically here, John Keats. A poet has no identity. He is continually in, for, and filling some other body. And so she's talking about that in reference to how she should not write poetry from her own perspective as Asian American woman, um, and it's these guys like Keats, and she mentions a couple of others who have set this up to be this is the way you do it, and whatever you are feeling, you have to wrap yourself around to fit these parameters that we have set up before you.
Yeah, and it's not just like that in poetry, in the arts. It's like that in academia. Period. It's the way we write a damn thesis. It's like I can't say I can't say me, I can't make this personal. It has to come from this weird third party that is me, but it's not me all at the same time. It's like who created these rules around what wording is, how language works, how research works, and like we know where
What's
do we get this?
acceptable?
Yeah, what's acceptable for language, and we do this with everything. Like, and then this is why such things as code switching in minority communities exist. It's because we're very much aware of how we sound to white communities. It was this meme that I saw on Facebook that said something like, "Oh, you guys put so much stuff on your Facebook that's personal that could get you fired." And then the response under that post, as like a retweet, was like, "I do not attempt to live my personal life as a professional one." And it makes you step back and go, why do we try to live our lives according to professionalism? And we all know again that professionalism is embedded in white culture. And
Mhm.
why is that? It's like even talking to my supervisor about some of the things that we do. It's just white culture. Even communication in the workplace, it's just white culture.
Well,
Very,
yes,
very passive, aggressive weirdness sometimes.
the things of that keep people from specific jobs. The background checks, the drug test, the
Cover letters.
Hmm.
cover letters, the expectation of a certain degree
Hmm.
already. Things that
Even
will keep people out of the ability to get those
yeah,
jobs.
even something as simple as like how you dress.
Yeah.
How you
I
wear
know
your hair.
Shamika. I was gonna say I know Shamika runs into a lot of problems with people saying her hair's not professional.
Mhm.
Yeah. And it's so crazy because I think back and she kind of mentions these things like, almost not knowing who your true self is as a minority because you're constantly trying to white please people all day. There was a time and I look back at it now and I hate it. I hate those pictures. But being in college at CMU, I was wearing fucking blonde hair. Like, why was I wearing blonde hair? You would never catch me dead today in blonde hair. But there's at least 5 to 10 pictures in at CMU where I am wearing honey blonde, damn near platinum blonde hair. It is almost like, it's the whitewashing that we all go through to make ourselves feel more like puzzle piece into this world that we don't quite fit in.
I think that's a really good analogy. It's you're like a puzzle piece that doesn't fit the picture that you're trying to be forced into.
Yeah. But
Um,
and also sometimes you desperately want to be in the picture.
yeah,
You want to be a part of the picture. It just doesn't want you there.
Well, I think that's really interesting because that's basically the entire point she's trying to make when she starts doing stand-up comedy. She's bombing and she's relishing in the fact that she's not succeeding. It's an allegory for being a minority person trying to fit into a white space that you don't, but you're still trying to.
mhm.
Hmm.
And in there, like it was more acceptable to not succeed in stand-up comedy than it would be to not succeed, you know, pulling off a more white persona as a minority.
I think it's funny that she tries to almost embody Richard Pryor, which is such an extreme for her because you hear all these like stereotypes about Asian women, and then you have this very I wouldn't want to call him flamboyant, but his caricatures was just like out there, out of the norm. And I remember there were times where black people listened to Richard Pryor and was like, "What in the hell is he doing on that stage?"
One of my favorite things about her writing style is it's a very nice blend of um, you have to break out your dictionary every once in a while because she knows more words than you do. But at the same
Hmm.
time, she's also dropping the F bomb, every other page. And that's one of my favorite quotes so far in this book is she runs into somebody at a party, and Shamika, you touched on some of the stereotypes of Asian women, and she recalled somebody saying to her, "Oh, I've never seen an Asian woman do coke before." So
Right.
Yeah.
she's used to smashing through these social barriers. I think it's awesome.
Which is just goes back, and I always say this because it's important. But minorities are not a monolith. Black people are not a monolith. Asian people are not a monolith. We are individuals within a grand culture.
White people are also not a monolith.
You are not. You love to be though sometimes. You all
We've
love to
turned
be in
ourselves
that.
into as close as we can get.
You turn yourselves into like little whitewashed people, which is so sad. But y'all got to
Yeah, no,
contend with
because
your own
we were
culture.
talking about this before we started this about how you feel that you whitewashed yourself from going to Central, and that John, Sam, and I are from extremely white small towns, and
Small.
so for a lot of people who come from that kind of a place, Central is eye opening.
Yeah.
Like
Hmm.
my home county, I looked it up once, is 96% white.
That's
96. 5,000
never
people,
heard.
96% 86%.
I'm surprised it's not higher.
Yeah, and that's so.
But I think that goes to speak that places of academia were never really meant for either one of us. Like, those places were created for, and we got to think about the original creation of college was to uplift rich upper echelon white men. And so it's like that was what the culture of college was for. It never meant for minorities, especially women, to come in. And it never meant for, people who were rural and more impoverished in those communities to come in either. So for you, it was a culture shock. For me, it was a culture shock, but just in different ways
Yeah.
because it wasn't a community really made for us.
Cool. I do want to bring up a quote from the book from this story that kind of bridges into the next story. She said that one characteristic of racism is that children are treated. Oh, wait, was that actually in the next story?
It's a weird way to transition to the next story.
That is
Yeah. Oh, okay. Sorry.
That's all right. It's a good quote. So
Yeah. Okay. Well, I guess we'll just transition to the next story. And I'm going to start with this quote because it's a really good quote. Let me find it again. She's talking about in the next story. She's talking about her experience as a child, growing up in a America that romanticizes the idea of childhood innocence, and how it is really doesn't connect with her experience as a minority child growing up in America. And she's talking about how one characteristic of racism is that children are treated like adults and adults are treated like children. And she goes on and talked about how she watched her parents being debased by white adults like they are children, and how shameful that felt. And she said to grow up as an Asian in America is to witness the humiliation of authority figures like your parents and learn not to depend on them. They cannot protect you.
Yes.
Which is honestly like a tragic concept. And she goes in depth about why in America we have this idea of the innocence of childhood, and have this like nostalgic relationship as a white person, have this nostalgic relationship with our childhood. And books like Catcher in the Rye, which she read in ninth grade, and she was told that she would fall in love with it, but she just didn't connect with it at all, as a minority.
Well, I kind of want to, before we get ahead of ourselves, because those experiences that she has with I want to say, denunciation of her parents from adults to children is something that a lot of minorities can relate to. Like, for in this country, black men for a long time, even when they were like 50 and 60, were regarded as boy by white men, specifically in the South. It was boy this, boy that, and then like a lot of, even now, black women we don't call ourselves women. Sometimes we go, I'm a black girl. It's because like of that, constant being delegated to that of you know, a child status your entire life. That womanhood and manhood doesn't seem fully realized as a person of color. So that is really the fact that it's like a lot of minorities have similar experiences. They come wrapped in different ways, but those experiences very much they're very similar in reference to white supremacy anyway. Even though there's intra-community differences, and intercultural differences, those similarities are very starch in looking at how white supremacy delegates or regulates minor statuses to people of color. So, like, I think that that's really interesting that she didn't feel like her parents were adults in her eyes, and because of that, they can't offer you protection. A lot of the reason why black kids get the talk of when you're driving and you do these things and these things here and you do X, Y, and Z when you're getting pulled over by a cop is because your parents literally cannot protect you from death. They are just as much a victim of the world as much as you are, and there's nothing they can do to save you or protect you, which is like antithetical to what we preach about. Is like, oh, our parents are our saving grace, they prevent harm, they protect, they provide. And it's not always like that in minority communities because your parents literally will become um, defenseless against the world themselves. So how can they protect you? So the little things we do go a long way to secure our children, which is, I mean, I go off on these tangents in my own head about things, but people always look at the black community as like punishment is so severe. When it comes to our children, I definitely was whooped as a kid. And a lot of reasons is because if our parents don't catch us early and discipline us first, then there's some other authority figure that will come in and discipline us worse or potentially kill us. So we don't have the time to be taught to do things at a slower pace. The best way to do it is just through direct punishment. It's quick and it's fast and it's easy versus trying to this elongated talking out these circumstances and sitting down in timeouts. You don't get that. You won't probably get that opportunity for your child before their life becomes in jeopardy because they weren't taught the societal ills early on. So yeah, a community of no protection, which I think was definitely detailed in the reparations book that we had discussed
Mhm.
several weeks ago about there's no protection as a minority. But I think I found that interesting that she had similar experiences as I think people who are black have.
Yeah, with
Which
not
is
just their
weird because
parents.
you're a minority. It's like they're also the model minority. So it's like, what? How are you having similar experiences?
Yeah, but I mean, she touched on the whole model minority concept in the first book as well,
Yeah, she
and
does. Yeah.
or in the first story, sorry, um, and talking about how they're almost like they're almost used as a tool to be pitted against the black community.
Mhm.
Um, and even though they're model and they're well behaved, that doesn't. There's still racism, a lot of racism towards them, and they're
Yeah, there's
still
no
not allowed
protection.
access. Yeah, they're still not allowed access to the spaces where white people are allowed access to. Um,
I found it kind of interesting that literally just this last week, on Last Week Tonight, John Oliver's main story was on Asian Americans and the uh, the idea of the model minority and things of that like we've been talking about in this, and I'm like, oh, it's kind of interesting to see the coincidence of the time lining up. But
I think that's because the world that we entered in last year really put that model minority status to the test.
mhm.
We had an opportunity to see it open up and see like, oh, you're so model, right? But look how they treat you. And it's
Yeah,
like they give you this privilege, but then look how quickly that privilege can be snatched from you. I know a lot of minority, or Asian minority individuals who have bathed in that model minority status. I mean, bathed heavily into it. And this was a wake up call this past year for like, you're no more preferred than the black person that lives down the street from you. You just get this pass, 50% of the time. But when you are now seen as a threat,
mhm.
that pass is just gone. You know, and it's not like a haha moment, but for black people, we over here like we tried to tell y'all. And it's like we tried to tell you they don't like you no more than they like us. It's just a technique and a tactic, and it's really sad because you've seen a lot of Asian American people, feel duped by it. Feel, and it is. It's really sad to see people fall from grace who are genuinely trying to work hard to make it and didn't know they were getting played.
Yeah,
But a lot of things were a wake up call this past year.
yeah, and she kind of talks about that in the story about how under Trump's administration, racism is now out in the open, which teaches more kids to be racist. And um, kids are blunt and they parrot whatever their parents tell them. Um, and she said she felt a lot of shame because of very racist children who were just spewing out the racist nonsense that their parents fed to them.
Mhm. Honestly, Trump's administration was a blessing and a curse. I look at it as I am so glad to know the people who feel the way that they feel are in my face in saying it. Nothing is scarier than having people hide behind sheets. You want to know who your enemies are up front. And I'm so glad that he exposed people for what they are. Come on out. Be free with your racist
But
ideas
more
and
than that,
agendas.
I mean, he used fear to apply new racist ideas to people's existing fears about their own insecurities. So, in some ways, yeah, he took people who were openly racist or who were very racist at their core and turned them openly. But at the same time, he recruited so many more people who um, might have hate and fear and things like that, and gave them a face to apply those negative feelings to. I can't talk about that without thinking about Star
Hitler.
Wars and the dark side. It's like all of the no, I mean I've been watching a lot of Star Wars, so maybe that's it. But like all the things that Palpatine says to Vader, your hate, your anger, fear leads to the dark side, and that's what Trump took advantage of.
Yeah.
Honestly, I think people are tired of hearing the comparison, but it's apt, and that's the exact same thing that Hitler did. Germany had, a long streak of rough history, and he said it's this group of people's fault that we are in the situation that we are in, and used that to drive fear and gain power. It's the exact same thing that Trump did. So I agree with you that it's nice to know who is vehemently opposed to our ideas of inclusion and common sense.
Who deserves humanity?
Yeah, but at the same time, I think it's important to note that he took a lot of people who might disagree with us politically, and we might have not things in common with, and he actively turned them into racists. And so now, like I can't remember if it was you or Sam was saying that it's now it's passing down to children. And so one of the things that that I've at least heard in left-leaning circles is, well, once we start educating people and moving down the line, racism will die out, and then stuff like this happens. And so now you have more radicalized younger people who pass that down to their kids, and now it's another 150 years before we got to where we should have gotten.
I don't know. I look at it as our family is our first institution that we ever get contact with. It's the first social institution you'll ever meet. A lot of people, this is how they became, deep-seated racist to begin with, is that their family embodied this culture in their homes. And then school then reinforced it, and then the church reinforced it. And so we've literally been carrying the DNA of racism through our learned behavior for a very long time, and we've been passing it off from one institution to the next, and then growing it through all these cultural practices that we have right now that sustains it. So it's, when you say he turned people into racists, he gave them a pedestal of which to stand on. That inkling had been there for years. It was just now they felt validated in stepping into that full realm of what they've been thinking all along. When you know that people are going to support your bullshit, you're like, okay, well, I feel more confident in saying it out loud. There's, whole communities, for instance, that support, I hate to say this, there's whole places where white people feel very comfortable saying the N-word. And it is like they wouldn't go to certain communities and say it, but in a place where people look like them are supporting of that usage, you will see that N-word used more often. So the hate and the discrimination and those feelings that are internalized have been there for a long time. They just haven't been reinforced enough to make them more prominent. And then they get reinforced enough when someone like Trump or Hitler stands up on a podium and validates it. So what we see is him bringing out the true form of these individuals, but they've been there. They've just been hiding all along,
I think,
hoping that no one finds out about who they are.
Yeah. Well, I think what we might be disagreeing on is that there was a wide variety of people who, for lack of a better term, converted to Trumpism. So there are people who were very inherently racist to begin with.
Is Trumpism a religion?
Might as well be.
Define a religion. We don't have enough time for that.
Something you do
ritualistically.
ritualistically.
Cult, yeah. I mean, I just personally, those are very synonymous terms. But see, you've got people who are very inherently racist ahead of time, very inherently racist who got to be out in the open, and then you have people who are kind of secretly racist who got to be out in the open. But I do think there's a wide group of people who have their own best interest in mind and they're not as empathetic to other people's causes. And so when you have somebody come along and say, it's these people, you'd be fine. Like, when you talk about Mexicans coming across the border, you're like, they're gonna rape you, they're gonna murder you, they're gonna do all of this bad stuff. If it wasn't for these people, you'd be safe. And so he uses fear to put ideas into some people's heads. And I'm not sticking up for people who voted for Trump, but I'm saying some people were manipulated into having racist thoughts that they never previously did have.
Yeah.
So he's saying, no, go ahead.
I think I brought it up in our meetings before. I don't know if I brought it up on live before. And if anybody watching knows what TED Talk I'm talking about, please let me know because I cannot find it.
Drop it in the comments.
Please. But there was a TED Talk I watched that was really interesting about Trump supporters and how he rallied behind people who were mainly lower class because there's such a strong relation with morality and wealth in this country. And there's this unspoken ideology that if you're not wealthy, you are immoral. And these people, they're not wealthy, but they can't believe that they're bad people because they're not wealthy. And then Trump comes along and says, well, this is why you're not wealthy. It's not your fault. It's their fault.
It's 100% tied into the idea of the American dream.
Yeah.
Right. This is the place where you come, you work hard. That's the thing, is a lot of people tie morality into working hard. So you're a good person, you work hard, you get good things. That's what America has been built on. That's the lie that's been fed down people's throats. So when they believe, like Sam said, they're a good person, they've been working hard, for most of them, there must be some extenuating factor as to why that they're not in a good position. And I think you have talked about this before, because the one thing that stuck out to me was the tie between morality and wealth not only makes them believe that they should be wealthy and that there's another factor, it also validates Trump himself as a wealthy man. It works backwards to insinuate his morality, which just blows my mind.
Yep.
But this isn't something new. Like when we look at this concept of appealing to, what I consider to be white, rural, impoverished, uneducated individuals, because it's a specific subgroup that the rich pander to, the elite panders to, because of these ideas of elitism is embodied in people who are poor and people who are wealthy. We have always been individuals in this country that adopt elitism ideas, which is why when we take issue with people, who may say, oh, we're going to tax the rich, billionaires are going to get taxed over this amount of money. And then there's some poor person sitting down in their kitchen, a food desert in their community saying, oh my God, I can't believe you're taxing those rich people like they themselves are going to be rich one day. It's the way that elitism is embodied in all people, but more specifically the poor, which is why the planter elite, prior to the Civil War, was able to get poor white men to sign up to fight their war for them for slaves they didn't even own and could not afford. And they were willing to go fight these wars, this specific war, to maintain slaves they could never purchase. And it's like that embodiment of these ideals that are so high and valued in our culture are not even the things we personally value, but they're thrusted upon us because someone needs them to sustain, and they reinforce that with us. So you get the morality, you get the working hard to be able to provide. And even though we see that doing so doesn't get you any closer to wealth, we continue to see that because those are tools that are used by the elite to make us feel like they themselves got here primarily through those things, when we also know that is not true. So this is a whole system of how America became who it is or what it is. And we look at how these systems have been perpetuated over time. We say Trump is more about the blatant racism, and he is. I can 100% agree. He is like a call to actual violence, a call to and name calling and using scapegoat tactics. But he is no different than any previous Republican who used institutional racist practices to get people to follow them and to vote in certain ways. It's just a different tactic to get everyone to appeal because he knows his audience, and he also knows his audience is filled with uneducated individuals.
Well, to kind
So
of
he has
tie
to
back
talk the
into,
talk that works.
yeah, to kind of tie back into some of the things that we're talking about in the book, she was a big part of academia and in literature and poetry specifically. And I think that's probably one of the most undeniable facets of institutional racism. Like we mentioned earlier, like not even the three of us white guys. We come from middle class, lower middle class families in rural areas. Institutions like academia were not built for us. So you have that group of people who are the only ones who get to pass into knowing things, which turns out to be very important for setting up policies, in politics and societal structures in general. Well, they're going to be the ones who build systems that favor themselves, even if they don't completely intend to, as we kind of talked about earlier. And that's just one way that throughout history, that's always been something that is built to keep minorities and even lower class people down.
Yep. And it's easier to maintain that power and maintain that control if you get lower class, poor white people to blame other minorities who are in the same situation they are in. But it's not our fault you're in your situation. It's their fault.
Right.
That's the problem. And you guys fight amongst yourself while I make $1 billion this year.
I've said it for a long time that we have, lower class people in terms of, financial status have more in common, no matter what race, than poor white people and rich white people. That's
surface level. We do surface level. Yeah, being impoverished offers up, a limited
when you're talking
amount
about
of
quality of
resources
life and things like that.
Yeah,
those
we
sorts of
do.
things.
But the variable that comes into play is when race is thrown in, and we see that poor white men and women then become these embodiments of elitism, and then they take that and it becomes racialized. Yeah, we have more in common, most definitely, with each other. But when race is thrown in as a variable, then that commonality is gone. There is no common plight after that. It's just this is a race problem. And we see that even with people who are black and uber rich, racism doesn't end for them because of that. That access doesn't end because of this power structure that is created on race. So even if you were a rich black person, it's really still hard to escape discrimination. It's still hard to escape racism because it's too embedded in the culture in which we live.
Real quick, I heard an anecdote recently that reminded me of in the 2008 presidential election between McCain and Obama. The birther movement was extremely racist, talking about how Obama was not born, on U.S. soil, and everybody wanted to see his birth certificate and everything. And I recently saw this he wasn't even the candidate whose birth status should be in question, because apparently John McCain was born in the Panama Canal Zone, which was under U.S. Jurisdiction. But I think I have these dates right. I think it was 1962 he was born, and then in 1963, it was some law was changed to say that that was U.S. territory. And then in the Constitution, it says if you're going to be president, you need to be a naturally born citizen. And for him to be born a year before this law was passed that said that was U.S. territory, that at least, while legal professionals agreed that he probably would have been okay, that wasn't a conversation that we as a country were having. While it was very public that we were going after Obama for his birth status, just because
the white men do not get questioned on their authenticity in this country. We don't question white men's authenticity for Americans. Like, y'all are America. You know, like that is like that's how they say it out loud. Y'all, we're Americans.
I just
You
think
know,
that
like
you made a good point when you said that wealth does not, put
no.
black people above being judged for the color of their skin. And he is wealthy, but I think more so than that, Obama has political stature, and so no combination of those things can take away the fact that he's black, and will be
Oh
treated
my
like that
God,
by
there
some.
was. I just posted about that on my Facebook about all the things that black people do to try to mitigate our blackness, to not erase it but try to make it seem like it doesn't matter, or we try to add fuel like, well, I've done this, I've done that, but yet you still judge me as a black person. It's like, oh, but I got these degrees, but I talk appropriately when I'm on the phone with you. I do my hair a certain way. I own this boat. It's like we try to do all these things to offset the devaluing that comes with blackness. But one of the things I say is blackness is so encompassing. It is so big that nothing can erase the associated negativity that comes with it. So it's like you will still get killed in your bedroom, rich, poor, other than just on blackness alone. It is something that cannot be erased. It's not something that can be altered on a scale to make it fit, to change your circumstances. It is here and it's real and it's not going away. It's this, and for a lot of us growing up, it feels like this black stain. And going back to some of the things that she's saying in here is like, you can't erase this minority status that you have. You cannot get rid of it. There's nothing that you can will away. And I see, she tries to do that in her academia, because I believed it too. It's like, I get one more degree, I get one more certificate, I get one more. You think you're going to put yourself closer to this threshold of whiteness that you will never get the door open to, for, because blackness is blackness is blackness, and you can't get rid of that. And that's so important when she talks to, and I think she wants to be more authentic than she is, because she sees how much she's whitewashed herself to fit into a culture that never wanted her to fit in the first place. And it's something I honestly think a lot of us as minorities go through. I'm going through it right now, and this is a weird transition where you just get the case of the fuck it. You're like, fuck, I don't give a damn. Like, I'm waking up blacker than I was last night. How about that? It's like you get to a point where you don't care. It's like, I don't care. I'm blackity black, 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 and I don't care. And it takes a long time to almost get there, because you've been in a rat race of crawling, scratching your way to the top, and you realize that there is no top. There just is. And you will never be a part of the upper echelon. So to hell with it. Might as well just live your life as
I
black as you
think
want to be.
I think that is one of the central themes of this book, is like she starts to realize more so a lot of these things are happening. Obviously, as growing up as a minority, you're aware of a lot of things, but she starts to realize certain other aspects as she gets older and starts, thinking big picture about this kind of stuff. And one of the things that I really enjoy about this book is it seems like we're going to go on this journey of self-realization with her. She's in some of these anecdotes that she's talking about, she's in college, she's younger, she's just starting out as a poet. We know, obviously, with the benefit of being in the present, that she becomes extremely established. But she's just starting to grapple with some of these big picture things. And I'm super excited for, like, we took a little bit of time off. I almost just read the rest of it because I'm really invested in the story now. It's really compelling. I just want to know how it ends. If there's one of two ways I think it could end. It could either be like, you ever watch like those like Discovery Channel documentaries on like Bigfoot, where they give you like all of the evidence, and then at the end they're like, and then you decide if Bigfoot's real.
Yes.
It could be like that, where she's like, here's all of my
It's
experiences,
annoying.
and now you kind of draw your own conclusions about critical race theory and things like that, or she's going to come out and say like, bam, this is what I believe, this is where I've come from, and the things that I've established as true and true, and not in the factual sense, but like of higher magnitude truths.
It's so crazy that even now, with all of this coming out, because I think I was I remember leaving college and being so pissed because all this stuff that I had learned about all these things as a sociology major, no one else had caught on. It was not trending. And I was like, "Oh, I know all this stuff, and no one talks about it, and makes you mad. And for you to just drop the phrase critical race theory, and I'm like, damn it, people are trending on things that I've been talking about for years. That now, like, these stories are allowing us to have conversations about pretty much things that are Marxist in their design. Like, these are Marxist theories. These are socialists. A socialist created these theories that we have now been applying. We've been applying now to different institutions into minority status to get the phrase critical race theory, because it was just critical theory. And now they go, okay, we'll put the race in there because we're gonna talk about racial things. But
Right.
it's like seeing these terms become more evident in our culture, society. Through this, we are educating people, and you don't have to go to a university to figure this out now. And we can have these conversations in our living rooms, in our bedrooms, in our homes, on these kind of platforms and forums where people are getting the best education that they can, so that we can start to tackle this huge material and apply this knowledge to memoirs like this and to short stories in our own personal lives. So it's really awesome to see those things happen, and for you to drop that bomb. I'm like, have you even had a sociology class a day in your life? But
You
it's
got,
yeah.
if you're watching this, guys, you don't have to take a sociology course. The internet is out there. Just go and read. Obviously,
Read.
check your sources and stuff. You don't be reading off of, Larry's blog or stuff like that. But like genuine academic sources, it's important to be informed.
And read these books, the books that we're talking about in book club. That's why we're doing this, is to educate ourselves and our community on these issues that we were never taught about in school. That our education that was whitewashed has failed us, and we're doing the work to learn. And we hope that you guys come along on the ride with us and participate and enjoy these books and learn about the real history of what minorities have gone through in this country.
Firsthand.
I think of it, we talk about the real history. I want to say that to learn about the real history of America, because that's really what it is. It's like we have to relearn the real history of the country that we actually were born and raised into, because they told us a bunch of lies to make themselves feel better, and we don't feel better. So that's the issue.
Didn't work.
So
And the famous quote about history,
It's written by the victors.
well, the other famous quote about history is, those who don't know history are doomed to repeat it. So
yeah.
it is important that we understand what the roots of this country are, the systems that are in place and where they came from, how that affects what we live in today, and how we can affect change to ensure that it doesn't repeat itself.
Well, thanks for watching, guys.
We went on a little bit of a tangent. Thanks.
It's still related to the.
No, we didn't.
Yeah.
I think this is awesome, because that's the whole point of this, is that we can spark conversations in our own realities. This is her reality, but there's similar experiences across the board, that we need to use this to explore our own struggles and the things that we have come across through the themes of her writing, and all of these writings that we've been reading, from Watson's to now. It's like being able to get into the meat and potatoes of what's going on. Because what matters is our real lives right now. She's one person, but there's all of us are having some experiences that we couldn't put a name to. And now that she's written this, piece, now we could probably start putting names to these feelings, these minor feelings.
Yeah.
Killed it. Drop the mic. Just exit. Just leave.
Thanks so much to everybody who joined. We're gonna go ahead and end the stream. We'll be back next week. Stay tuned if there's any announcements. There's been a lot going on in all of our lives right now, so just be patient with us and stay tuned. We'll let you know if we're not going to be here next week, but we plan on 2 more weeks of this book, and then we're going to wrap it up. And then don't forget, June 19th, we're having our first ever in-person Juneteenth event. We're all very excited for it, so we hope to see you there.
Go to our page and find it and follow and come hang with us.
Bye.
I guess.
Okay, bye.